Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics. Welcome to the Love Notes Mystery Sew Along. This quilt was designed by Kimberbell, and it's supposed to be a fun 5-week journey. And thank you, Kimberbell, for letting us here at Shabby Fabrics not only jump into the fun, but also prefuse and laser cut all of the applique shapes that are included in this quilt. So that saves so many of us a lot of time of tracing and cutting shapes out. Now, if you're doing the machine embroidery version, there may be some pointers that I can offer you along the way, maybe when we get to piecing or things like that. But of course, with machine embroidery, you have your own processes, and I know you'll be following those as normal. So we'll be definitely just tailoring this for the sewing version and for the laser cut applique. So let's dive right in. I'll be using all of the things on the table, and as I touch those items, we'll be talking about them and why we chose those over other possible choices to have when you're making a quilt like this. Normally I have a quilt hanging behind me so that you can see what we're going to be making, but of course this is a mystery and we don't really know. Right away inside your box, first off, the box is amazing. I just think Maywood Studio actually put this together, and Maywood Studio prints Kimberbell's fabric. They thoughtfully put this box together, and it's wonderfully sturdy, and I am planning as we progress to put my blocks in there for safekeeping from week to week. So straight away we see our embellishing kit. I'm excited to dive into that. I know on the very back she has a list of what's included. I definitely encourage you to just make sure everything is in your package, and if there's something missing, be sure to let us know and we'll take care of that for you. I mean, applique glitter sheet, vinyl, we've got leather. I've never used a lot of these things, so we're going to be doing that for the first time together. We have a fabric cutting guide from Shabby, and we'll go into that in just a bit. We've got a couple things, and these are additional information because you have a laser cut kit. When Kim wrote the instructions for Love Notes, it was for the sewing version, assuming that you were going to be doing all of the cutting of everything, including applique shapes. So that's why there's an additional piece of information included in your box that we'll touch on in just a minute. Your first envelope, of course, and as you know, there'll be an envelope for 5 weeks. You'll get a new envelope in the mail with new instructions, working in a new section of the quilt. So this is our very first one for now. Let's put that aside for just a moment. Here's your laser shapes. This is what you all signed up for. Those are all the things you don't have to trace and cut out. We've taken care of that for you, and there's heat and bond light on the back of those shapes. So let's put that aside for now as well. We'll be digging into that before you know it. And of course, all of our fabric here, and that fabric will be everything that you need for your piecing and for your finishing. So let's just put our box aside just to help reduce what's on the table. So we want to make sure, you know, the box is another great place to just keep your fabric, especially there's plenty of fabric in here. As you cut your shapes out, keep absolutely everything. And we'll definitely talk about laser shapes because there's tiny little laser shapes. It's very easy to lose those or not realize there's a laser shape there. More about that later. Let's dive into this envelope. Let's just start unpacking that, and then we can talk about how is your kit a little bit different because you have laser cut. So let's look at that. So we'll open up our section 1 sewing envelope. And they're just adorable the way that they printed that on there. And let's have a look here. Of course, Kim is welcoming us to the mystery quilt, and we are definitely excited to be here too. And she does say you'll find hints and the descriptive block names in the cut list. So let's just turn the page here. Right away, getting started, preparing and getting organized for a project can save lots of time and energy. At Kimberbell, we love the simplicity of using resealable bags. This is a new concept to me, by the way. I've never done something like putting things in bags ahead of time. I've definitely pre-cut out a kit, but not organized it really into bags. And this is a really interesting idea, and we've gone ahead and done that. So at Kimberbell, we love the simplicity of using resealable bags to sort the fabrics as you cut. So she had us write the name on our bag. So I'll just show you what that looks like. So she's got say cheese is row 1. So we've gone ahead, just grab some bags. We printed that out on some labels just so that you could read that instead of my handwriting. And we've got those all organized in the bags as she suggests. Now, I know that's a lot of bags moving around on the table for me. So what I also did, which is a little bit in addition to that, is all of the row 1 bags here, there's 6 of them. I put them in a larger bag just because, especially with me teaching, it's easy for me to lose bags. Things might slide off the table. So I've put row 1, yes, they're in the individual bags, but I also put them in a larger bag so they're all contained. Just an idea. So now you basically have 4 larger bags, row 1, 2, 3, and 4. So that's just a suggestion. It's not in the pattern. Now, in addition to that, of course, there's a reason you bought this laser cut kit, right? And that's so that Shabby Fabrics would cut all of those applique shapes for you. What does that mean? So let's progress through what Kim has written here. On the sheet here on page 3, she lists what each fabric is within your kit. I love how she gives us a picture of that and lets us know that of that block, we need to cut all of those shapes, but you actually don't. You only need to cut some of them. So how would you know what you need to cut and what you don't need to cut? That's where the supplementary information comes in from Shabby Fabrics. So let's go ahead. If you've got your kit, go ahead and pull out this page here that says applique key important. This is all really important information. And for now, we'll go ahead and put this pattern, the original Kimberbell pattern, aside just for now because we've modified this for your laser cut kit. Important. The fabric requirement cut list on page 3 through 5 and the Love Notes pattern and the fabric cutting diagrams have been replaced with a customized fabric cutting guide. This on page 7 is the fabric cutting diagrams. If you were cutting every single fabric yourself, background piecing or applique, you would be cutting out all of those shapes. Notice how now you have far less to cut out. See that? You see the difference here? Of the gray, you only have to cut 2 shapes, whereas before you'd have cut all of that. That's why you can disregard the included page 7 of the original Kimberbell instructions because you'll only be referring to this guide. Everything else will be included in your laser cut shapes. So hopefully I'm trying to be very clear on that because it can be kind of confusing, like which do I refer to and which do I don't. For the pages 3 through 5 and page 7, refer to us, and then for everything else, we'll be referring to the Kimberbell instructions. So let's jump right over into that fabric cutting guide. You're like, okay, great, I've got my 24 bags, I'm stickered, I'm ready to go. What do I do now? Every place that's laser cut will have a gold seal there and say laser cut. You don't need to worry about cutting those fabrics. Notice for the black polka dot, you don't have to cut anything. We've taken care of all of that for you. But for the black plaid, you'll go ahead, get your kit going, get your fabrics going, and you'll say, okay, I'm going to go ahead and cut for row 2, a 2.5-inch square, and that will go in my border block. And that's how you'll be able to cut the fabrics and know where they go and what bag to put them into. So hopefully that's clear. Let us know if you have questions about that, by the way. Jump in and join the fun on social media. You know, we're here just to have fun together. We are filming this in early August. We all know we're still in the middle of this pandemic. We can't necessarily get together to sew like we normally are used to in quilt groups, quilt retreats, and just small groups. So we are your group. So jump into the fun and let's just have a good time for the next 5 weeks making the quilt together. Okay, so we have cut all of the fabrics out and I've bagged them in my 24 bags. In addition to that, on your applique key here, we show you, hey, there's a shape that looks like this that's made out of that fabric. So let's look at that. So as we take our shapes out, I just want to show you what they look like. It's incredible to get a, look at that. It's perfectly cut. It just, in my fingers, just came out. So use this guide. Let me get some space. One of the things I thought was extremely helpful, and I'll show you what I've done. It might be easier just to see what I've done, is I've broken this out into 5 weeks. We're together for 5 weeks. And here, that number 4 with the black plaid says, oh, that fabric will be in week 4. I want to point this out. The numbers in each shape indicate the week it will be used. So you'll know that black plaid goes into week 4. That pink, white, and red stripe goes into week 4. There it is right there. And this goes into week 4. Go ahead and take all of your laser shapes apart and put them into those appropriate bags. That's really important. Look at how small some of the shapes are. Tiny. Do you realize how easy it is to lose? Using bags for this is invaluable. So I know that so many times when I haven't bagged things in the past, I've lost shapes and I end up recutting them. So I think this is a really handy step to go ahead and make sure everything is broken out into your bags based on the color or based on the number. And I also want to point out, please don't throw any of the fabric away. Here's why. There are some of the smallest little shapes. I think it's actually on this one right here. Let me show you this. Right away, I don't even know if the overhead camera can pick this out. See how I can pop this out? In fact, we'll just do it. Let's just pop this out, just like that. And then there's this shape, and this shape. And I think I'm done. I've gotten all the shapes, but I haven't. Look, there's other little shapes in here. So the point being, it's very easy to say, oh, I've got my shapes, and you throw it away. And then the trash comes and they pick up the trash. And you go, oh no, I didn't realize that. So I highly encourage you, go ahead and keep, even though it looks like trash, if you're missing a piece, it's in here. We have checked this. Here's another little tiny piece that you don't necessarily notice because it's so tiny. So I can't emphasize that enough to keep all, there's another little one that just popped out. Keep all of the little things. Here's the other thing. I could get one of these other little shapes if I actually lose that somehow. You could recut that out of that fabric. So that's a whole nother reason to go ahead and keep all that. All right, so I think you've heard me loud and clear to go ahead and get all of your shapes punched out. You don't necessarily have to remove the paper backing right now. You could if you want, but we will just take care of that all along the way. I want to point out one other thing to you about Kim's patterns and give you an option of what you think would work best actually for you. And that's going to be in the instructions. I think I inadvertently buried. And that's with regard to this embellishing kit. So let's just turn, if you've got your kit there and your instructions, go ahead and go to page 6. And this is where she lists her embellishments. And right away she's got applique glitter paper in pink, red, and white. And she mentions to go ahead and cut those to 2 by 2, 2 by 2. You can pre-cut those if you choose, and that's essential for machine embroidery. You would absolutely cut those out because that's just the machine embroidery process. For you and I doing the sewing version, I'm going to go ahead and leave all of my embellishments inside here and try to maximize my use of that glitter paper and the leather and everything else that's in here so that any leftovers I could use for another project. So I'm going to just suggest that maybe you keep this all intact at this point. But if you prefer, go ahead and cut those things out, and you can either put those in the applique bags, which probably would make the most sense. I just don't want you to lose any elements is the main idea. All right, so idea 1, get yourself organized. Once you feel you've done that, we're going to dive right into it. Let's turn to our page 8. Kim goes over some applique instructions, as well as trimming instructions, how to handle glitter. leather, hand embroidery. We'll be taking care of all that along the journey. So let's go ahead and jump right over to page 10, and we're going to start grabbing for some of our applique shapes. So we're going to be using just week 1, so I'll put all of these away just to reduce our clutter. I'm going to get my iron heating up. If you have an applique pressing sheet that you like to use, go ahead and grab that right now. We'll be needing that. We will be using just a little bit of heat and bond along the way. The glitter paper, I've discovered, actually is fusible, but the leather is not. So if you don't have any heat and bond light, just grab a small package of that. I'll be using remove that. I'll be using this applique mat. I love this mat. You're going to see it perform and you're going to be amazed. If you know what I'm about to do, you're like, yeah, I know that thing's amazing. And if you've never seen this before, you're going to be amazed because the way it performs and the way that you can pre-fuse these shapes together is incredible. So what is all of this about? So say cheese is our first block. So we'll grab our first bag that says say cheese. And we know that we're going to be using applique. I can easily see that for here, it's basically a background with everything appliqued. So now we will just grab a camera base, a camera front. Look how small some of these pieces are. Thank goodness they're in a bag, right? So I'll just put them all out on the table. And you'll just make the 3 cameras all at the same time. So we need that piece, this piece, and this and this. So I always like to make sure, do I have all of the elements that I need? And it looks like I do. And I think the white portion is when we get to start digging into our embellishing kit right away. The flash portion, the white portion, is out of felt. Now I like to, whenever I instruct, I like to show people where they're going so that you understand the goal. So I've actually done one of these ahead of time. I was able to get just a little bit of a sneak peek of what was coming to be able to prepare that for you so that we can maximize our time together on camera. So this is what we're going to, this is where we're going. This is our destination, and I'm going to help you get there. So let's just keep that out there with us. And that's going to be what we'll be creating right now. So we have our background fabric. I would really encourage you to please keep these bags. You know, if you do use the labels, maybe they can peel off and be used again, or maybe put another sticker on there. I just don't want those to end up, you know, in a landfill somewhere. So let's just keep reusing those plastic bags for sure. So we have our shapes. This is where I will go ahead and I'm looking for right away, I'm looking for where's my kind of layout. I want to be able to have a layout diagram, and it looks like it's right back here. So this is where I recommend a light box. You'll have your light box, you'll have your pattern, and we'll put our applique pressing sheet directly on top of that. And we'll go ahead and turn that on. Now I would normally have this brighter, but it tends to blow out the overhead camera. So I'll leave that fairly dim. Now this is where you'll just peel off your paper backing. So the quickest way, sometimes I've had struggles trying to get that. If you just fold the edge over just like that, notice how it just released the paper. And don't worry about there being a little crimp. That'll iron away when you iron that down. So we're just going to take that off of our fusible. And I'll just make the one camera with you on on film today. And I'll do the other 2 off camera, which we've actually, again, did ahead of time so that you could see what they look like. I know it's a sew along, but I know you don't need to see me make 3 cameras to understand how to make one, right? Okay, so we've peeled our papers off. One of the things I've done in the past, I would peel the paper off and they were in the bag together, but I found, especially if you live in a really warm climate, that they would kind of stick together. So there's a lot of reason if you're not going to get to something for a while to go ahead and not take the paper off until you're getting ready to actually make the project. So just looking at ours here, you can see that the piece that's the black is the furthest in the back. Now this applique pressing sheet, I don't know if you can hear it, it's tacky. So when I put this down, I'm just going to fill in the footprint. Now I want to point out one thing. We have already built in something called a tuck under. What that basically means is this shape doesn't butt up against the pink. It scoots underneath the pink, so there's a nice layering that happens. We've already taken care of that in the laser shape for you, so you don't need to compensate for that. We've already taken care of it. So your job is to basically, I'm just going to move that so you can see it. You're just going to lay this piece exactly in that footprint. You don't need to change that. So you can place that there, and you can press that, and because of the tackiness of the mat, it's not going to go anywhere. We'll press that here. And then the next shape it looks like that goes on is the gray. And I want to point out something real quick. There's a slight roundedness. It looks like it's just a rectangle, but there's a very subtle round in this corner. That's the part that goes down. Similarly, on the upper portion, there's a slight round at the top. That's the part that goes up. Just going to adjust that. Now, when I first started appliquing, gosh, a long time ago, let's just call it that, I would bring, and this is way before the technology of applique pressing sheets, I would bring shapes to the background one by one visually. There wasn't layout diagrams. And you know, I got in the ballpark, but I really love the precision of an applique pressing mat because now everything's just perfectly put together, which I love, that precision. And I'm just going to center that there. And I can see the arc of that. Now, while I know I have a leather heart there, I'm not going to deal with that right now. I'm just going to go with this right now. I need to move this out of the way. And we can just take this whole, it's kind of stuck to it there, the clinginess. We'll just take this with a medium iron. Make sure you're mindful, if you do buy the package of heat and bond light, or maybe you have some, the instructions for using that and the temperature are indicated on the back, and you do want to be mindful of that. Having the iron on either too hot or too long can definitely lead to failure. Okay, now while that's cooling down, I know you're going to be tempted to just yank that off there, but as you can imagine, the fusible aspect of the webbing needs to cool to make the complete transfer, right, and adhere the whole thing. So let it cool down as much as you're tempted. We already know, we see this heart on the front, and that is made out of our leather. So fun. And if you'd already pre-cut that to the 2 by 2 inch square, go ahead and grab that out. But I'm just going to be jumping right into that embellishing kit, and we will grab that. And we're also going to cut out the flash out of our felt. So let's grab our embellishing kit. It's a little bit noisy. I'll put that there for now. How fun is this? I bet many of you have done a lot of Kimberbell projects in the past, and you've probably sewn on plenty of glitter. And this is my first time sewing on glitter or leather, and I'm really excited about that. And she also said felt. We need to get some felt in here, so let's grab that as well. Okay, we'll put that aside because it's a little bit noisy. This is where we're going to use our heat and bond light, and I grabbed a small piece of that just so I don't, a little more easy to manage. So let's look at that. We know we have the heart to do 3 times. So that was another, my thought is, you know, you can pre-cut those to 2 by 2, but I'm going to try to maximize my leather so that I have some left over to maybe do on another project. You know, I am going to turn that light box back on because why not, right? You can see that from the overhead camera, but when you turn that on, You can really see it from the overhead camera. So I'm just going to trace that. Now be sure to trace this. I'm using a micron pen. You're used to me using a friction pen. The reason I'm using a permanent marker right now is I'm going to roughly cut around that shape and iron that to the back of my leather. Well, as you know about friction pens, the lines erase with heat. So if we chose a friction pen right now, the lines that we just drew would be gone. Have I done this before? Yes. And I was glad that no one was in my sewing room to see the embarrassment. But yes, true confessions of a quilter. I just grabbed my friction pen, which is my go-to, and traced my line, ironed it at the back of, actually it was a piece of wool, and I had nothing to cut out because I erased all my lines, and I felt like it's pretty silly. So keep a friction pen handy and a micron pen handy. The easiest way to remember it is if you're going to roughly cut around a line, always use a micron pen. If you're going to cut exactly on a line, go ahead and use the friction pen. So that's the easiest way to remember it. Now, one of the things Kim mentions in her instructions is with leather, vinyl, or glitter, we want to use a pressing cloth. And this is just a piece of muslin. You don't need to run out and buy an expensive pressing cloth. A pressing cloth is nothing more than a barrier between the iron and the substrate you're ironing. It's muslin. It can be a piece of just white plain cotton. It could be something that even has a simple pattern on it. It's just a design. It's just a barrier, so you get the idea. All right. Now I think I should have also just quickly done the flash, so we can do these at the same time. Same story. I need to use a micron because I'm going to be roughly cutting around. Now I would go ahead and draw all three of those, right? Why not do 3 hearts and line them all up and 3 of those but just to save time here, I'll just do 1 at a time. But you can see by actually not cutting things out, pre-cutting them into the 2 by 2 inch shape, it's going to save you product that you can use later on. So let's move that for now. Now I will be ironing to the back of the leather where you don't need to worry about using the pressing cloth. It's when you're on the front of the leather that you definitely need to go ahead and have that pressing cloth handy. So let's just do this here with the felt for our flash. And we'll cut out on the line. Now the scissors, you know, I remember being a young quilter and, you know, all of these just kind of more specialty things like Kai scissors. I thought, oh, a pair of scissors is a pair of scissors. No, it is not. And I've been fortunate to have been introduced to these scissors, and they are my absolute go-tos, especially if I'm cutting through anything thick like this, wool, anything like that. You just want to keep a pair or 2 of Kai scissors just handy, and I love that they're very portable. They're a little too big to go on the airplane. I've tried that, and they said, nice try, Miss Bosworth. That's not going to happen. So they're not quite going to let you on the airplane with those. Might get through security now and again, but probably not reliably. So I wouldn't recommend them for flying. But for your home use, maybe a quilt retreat, definitely grab a pair of scissors of the Kais. Okay, so we have our shapes cut out. Now we get to use, here, cool, look at this. Actually, I'm going to leave that on there. I was so tempted to take that out, but what am I doing? I need to go ahead and iron that leather on there. Let's take that paper off, and we'll just go ahead and visually center that. Try to keep my head out of the way. That's adorable. And once you place that cloth on there, just make sure you kind of just let it fall. You don't want the shape to move. All right, so again, kind of a medium heat. She does talk about, if you're like, I want to read more about that. She's got really nice instructions there about appliquing glitter. She talks about appliquing the leather and just the whole process of it. So let's see if we've got a good transfer. Anything that's as thick as the leather or felt takes longer to iron because, of course, the heat has to transfer through the substrate into the glue. So that's why you saw me hold that on longer than normal. And let's see if we did get a good tack on that one. All right, our flash. And then we're going to do some sewing. So while I'm doing this, you can start thinking about, all right, now it's time to actually stitch these things down to the background. Do you want to do coordinating thread? Well, as you know, we put together a coordinating thread set. Hey, by the way, before I talk about that thread set, just because that's white and I just don't want to take the chance of burning that, I am also going to cover that up with that pressing cloth. I don't think that's included in the instructions, but anytime I have a white, like a white wool or a white anything, I do like that barrier just in case my iron has a little bit of residue on the bottom. I try to keep it clean, but you never know. So we're going to leave that on there for just a bit. Let's get back to the thread set. We put together a coordinating thread set so that if you want to be able to have all of those shapes stitched down and nice coordinating colors, be sure to grab that. Now I've went ahead and loaded the pink, and for the most part, and I'll show you our block what we did here. We did a straight stitch around the leather, and then for the other shapes we did a blanket stitch, and then for the flash we did just a straight stitch. It's your choice though. You can do anything you want. A zigzag, you can do a straight stitch on everything. You're really not going to wash this quilt, so do whatever stitch you're comfortable with, but I encourage you to go ahead and practice, especially the blanket stitch, if you're going to choose that one, on some scrap fabric. That one's a little bit harder to master. All right, I think we are ready to peel this off. And look at that. That's incredible. I think this, and if you look at this sheet, there's nothing there. So obviously you've seen me use this sheet just now. If you love applique and you don't have this sheet, just pick it up. It is the one that is going to give you reliable results every time, and the sheet actually comes in this size as well as a larger one. So I just wanted to mention that to you. Of course, we're building a quilt together, but I also want to show you different products that you might want to think, hey, you know what, that'd be great for this other project that I'm working on as well. So let me move this out of the way for just a moment, because now let's talk about positioning the camera onto the background fabric. Notice, let's turn the page. She just kind of has this cute little tilt. There's nothing scientific about it. As you can see, we're definitely going to be cutting the block down in size with the orange pop rulers in just a little bit. So you really do have a lot of don't worry if you don't exactly nail it. We'll be able to square that up perfectly in a little bit of a different step down the road here shortly. But still, she's got this cute little tilt. So you know what, that's a suggestion. If you want your camera straight, make them straight. It's your project, and you can present the project however you want. So I like that angle. So let's go ahead and iron that down. We'll start with the leather with a straight stitch, and then let's go ahead, and I should actually have that pressing cloth because there's leather on the front. See how I'm not used to using that product yet? See, I was just like, yeah, iron it down. Well, now there's a piece of leather on the front. So that means I need to use the pressing cloth for the whole thing. And that'll be true as we progress through the quilt, and I know we'll be able to get to use the glitter sheets and all of the other fun embellishments as well. We'll have to be mindful of whenever we're ironing down a block that has any of those elements, and be sure to use that pressing cloth. Okay, let's head over to our machine. Let's start with the straight stitch. And then we will progress to, since I've got pink loaded, we will just stitch around the pink, and I would just come back. I'd actually make all 3 cameras because 2 of the cameras have the pink here and all of them have the gray. There's a lot of logic to going ahead and making all of those and stitching them all at the same time, so you're reducing the amount of thread changes you have to do. So let's just start off with our leather piece. I might shorten my stitch length just a touch here. My gosh, it's like sewing through butter. It's so cool. I can see I have to pivot frequently. I might even shorten my stitch length a little bit further. I'm just trying to kind of keep a visual the same distance from my thread to the edge of the leather. It's slow, as you can see. But one thing I do want to tell you about leather is if you have to seam rip something, those holes will still be there. So you really need to just get a new piece of leather. If something goes wrong, seam rip it, take it off, and replace it with another heart. All right, so I'm at my sewing machine. I've set it up for a blanket stitch, and I've just tested on some scrap fabric, and I'm happy with not only the distance over, but also the length. So you've got both of those to consider. I always like to start that at a place where I know is a logical beginning point. Like I wouldn't start it here and go around to the other side, because then I still leave this undone. So you might want to think about where's a good place to begin. And once you start, go back just one stitch to secure it. So I'll go one, and I'll go back one. There we go. And here we go. So as you can see, if you have a machine with a needle down position, you want to be sure to engage that. So if that happens where you go beyond that, go ahead and go back a stitch. Don't worry. I'll show you how to fix that, because that happens sometimes, where it just doesn't land at the right spot. Okay, I'll help you deal with that just a little bit later. I kind of merge over. And the same thing can happen actually where it ends. We definitely don't want to take one more stitch. There we go. Now we'll end it. So while we're here on the close-up, I wasn't expecting that extra stitch. Notice though I did go back and I kind of locked it. I'm just going to go actually take that stitch out. I don't like that stitch. I actually kind of backstitch and secure that area so that when I cut that away, this is still intact and not coming apart. It's just a reality of dealing with blanket stitch. And the more you do it, the more comfortable that you will get with it. And you'll know where your machine is going to probably end, so you can anticipate it. Now we would continue with the same process. With our gray, I'd probably just start here and go here, and then there and there. Of course, with our red, our black, and up here as well. For here, I just do a straight stitch around that, and same here. I mean, there's just not enough surface area to do any kind of blanket stitching, so probably just a simple little straight stitch. Okay, now we're ready to square up our block. So let's come on over and we get to use our pop rulers. Pop rulers are a Kimberbell product, and they are the coolest thing. You know, normally when we're trying to square up a block, we're just grabbing for a ruler. Well, it's still not a very precise thing. The rulers can shift, and it's difficult because you might not have a ruler that exactly fits that footprint. Well, Kim has, again, outdone herself with the invention of the pop rulers. They come in rectangles as well as squares, and we'll be using some of both in this particular project. So let me grab them out. She has a really nice guide included, and they also provide these stickies. And what's nice about the stickies is in the four corners of each section, go ahead and just put one of those dots. Just gives a little more tack, a little more grip, so things aren't sliding. There's some bonus shapes in here as well. We won't be using those in this particular project, but I love that they've thought about putting some extra goodies in there. And they also talk about what those are, and I believe there's even a free project on their website. So that's another idea, is to go visit that. But let's talk about what are we going to do right now. Well, our pattern, we don't have to guess. Our pattern's going to let us know what size they want us to square this up to. And she lets us know right there. That's when the pop ruler happens. Whenever you see that icon, that's when you know where are my pop rulers, where are those? So we're going to square the block up to 6.5 by 4.5. Now what we have here is actually a set of 3. So that's great. You're really getting 3 different rulers in one set. Now they can also be used in conjunction. I'll show you what I mean. This happens to be the 4.5 by 6.5 that we'll be using. And I'll put this aside for the moment, but I'm going to be grabbing for them shortly. If you're not sure what this is, at the very bottom, if you kind of tilt the ruler just a bit, it'll actually say, it says, cut size 4.5 by 6.5, finish size 4 by 6. If you struggle being able to see that, because it is a little bit difficult to see with the glare, just lay that on your cutting mat and you'll be able to see the footprint is truly 4.5 by 6.5. So we'll grab our fabric, and I love that we're able to see it. Because as you know, most rulers are covering up the design. I love that the design is right there. And that's why she had us cut this background to this size, so that our ruler just fits perfectly. Now let's say that you place that camera on a little bit not quite where you want it to be. This is your chance to move that around. All you need to know is whatever you see inside this grid is what you're going to use in the project. So you don't have to feel obligated to set that pop ruler right on top of that background fabric that you already pre-cut. If you like what you're seeing, and I do, let's go ahead. Now we're going to make sure you've got a fresh blade in your 45mm rotary cutter. I think a 28mm rotary cutter is probably too small for this project, so grab for your 45, and the 60 is probably also too big. And we're going to always work on our left side, and notice I have a spinning mat. The spinning mat with the pop ruler is key, and you'll see why. You really don't want to move your fabric once you begin squaring up, and you really have one chance at that, so you don't want to make any mistakes. We've already spent a lot of effort. Now obviously I would have stitched the whole thing down, but just to save time, I want to be able to show you the square up step. You're not going to just be cutting along next to the orange frame here. You're actually pressing up against that. So let's go ahead and open the blade. And I'm much more vertical. I'm used to cutting like this, but I notice I find myself much more vertical to get into that slot, and I am literally pushing against this frame and into the slot ahead, and I just carefully release. Now I'm going to rotate that mat. As you can imagine, I don't want to touch that fabric right now. I don't really want to touch that frame right now. Now to increase the safety, because you can see how close I am, what Kim mentions in her instructions is go ahead and add another pop ruler. They just nest. I have more space now to put my hand. That's all I've just done, is added to the safety factor, which is very important. We're still going to cut into that slot, pushing hard up against the side. And again, we'll rotate and repeat. Okay, now what we have here, I just missed that corner just a touch, and that's going to happen now and again. It's just a thread, and we'll pull that out and we're ready to go. And isn't that incredible? I just think the pop rulers are such a clever innovation on Kimberbell's part. Here we go again with that cleverness. And just to show you how cute these cameras are, we made the other two so you're able to see them. They're adorable, absolutely adorable. So here's the 3 of them. Now she doesn't mention anything about sewing them together, so I'm not going to dare do that. I see them side by side, and my instinct is that they're going to be sewn together, but she does not mention that in that step, so I'm not going to go there. What she does mention next, however, is to go ahead and move on to the click block, which is hand embroidery. So I'm excited to talk to you about hand embroidery. It's very simple, backstitch and also a French knot's what we'll be covering today. So we'll be looking for your block that's labeled click, and we'll grab that out. And she mentions that adding a fusible interfacing to the back of the fabric is a great option. We did not do that, and I regret not doing that because it's just another barrier between the front of the fabric and where the embroidery floss is. Let me show you what I'm talking about. This is a trimmed up block of where we're going to be going. I'd like to show you the destiny, and then I'm going to take you on the journey to get there. So this is one where we did not put the fusible interfacing on the back, and if I hold it up, you can probably see where the tails, where you end a stitch, are visible. If there was a fusible interfacing on the back, which we have at Shabby, the Shirtailor 950F is an incredible interfacing. It's fusible that you iron on the back of the fabric. It just is one more layer so that it kind of hides those, and it adds some stability and really makes the hand embroidery process, I think, even more enjoyable because the stitches are very stable. So anyway, I would highly encourage you to take that step, which we did not do, and iron that to the back. That's when we'll go ahead and bring our light box back into play and trace out our shape. But I love that Kim has also given us a guide for the frame. Notice it says cut line. See how big my fabric is? In fact, let me turn the light box on so you can see it all the way. My fabric is oversized. So again, we get to go ahead and square up, which I love. Now I'm using a striped fabric, so I definitely want to line up my design so that I'm running parallel with one of my lines. And this is where we'll go ahead and use our friction pen, and we're going to draw that line. We could do it by hand, but why? Let's use our technology and get a nice straight edge here. And the same. Now the embroidery floss that we'll be talking about, hand embroidery, we did not include in that kit, so you have the option to choose whatever brand you like. DMC is certainly something that I learned with. Cosmo is made in Japan. It's a fabulous embroidery floss. Sullivan's, boy, there's really so many different brands out there today. So grab your favorite. And if inside Kim's instructions, she does list Cosmo. So if you have access to that, you might want to grab those, or just grab your fabric and pick colors that you like. So I've drawn the outline, and then we're just going to draw the embroidery lines. And I'll just draw a couple letters. The main thing is I want to be able to just show you the process of the light box using the friction pen, which is erasable with heat. If you make any missteps, no worries, just take it to the iron it away, and start again. And I want to also show you how to do the back stitch, how to do French knots. So that'll be what we'll be doing next. The squaring up of this one's pretty straightforward. You're just going to be cutting on the line once everything is already embroidered. I'm just going to finish that while I'm here. All right, I'm going to grab the needles I'm using today are the Richard Hemming hand embroidery needles. You don't need to break the bank when it comes to hand embroidery needles. I just don't think there's really a needle out there that's a game changer, personally. These are just a couple dollars. And by the way, join the conversation. If you have a hand embroidery needle that you love, put in a comment. We would love to know about that. I've used a variety of brands, Colonial Needles, Richard Hemming, and everything in between, and they kind of just all do the same thing. But if you have a favorite needle, jump in there and tell us all about it. So let's grab some embroidery floss. So if this is new to you, embroidery floss comes in 6 strands, are twisted together, and you only want to use a length about as long as from your shoulder to your wrist, and not longer, or it'll become potentially twisted. Now inside here, as I said, there's 6 strands, and in Kim's instructions, she's very good about letting you know for We Just Click, backstitch the We Just with 3 strands of black, and the backstitch the word click and the exclamation point with 6 strands of red floss. 6 strands is the whole thing. You're going to just be using the entire thing. It's going to be quite bulky, but that's what you're going for, right? And I think we can see that on the side camera, is we're going for that impact word, and that's why we used more, the full 6. But let's go ahead. Whenever you want to separate floss, try to not be tempted to grab 3 strands at once. The best way to separate embroidery floss is to grab 1 strand at a time, keeping this horizontal, and I pull it out just like that, and then I smooth this again. And I grab the next strand, just like this. Again, I kind of smooth that out, and I quickly pull that out, and I smooth it again. If you don't smooth it again, you're going to end up with a tangled mess. And then I smooth this again. Now that's already 3. So the next time that you need to stitch something with 3, you already have it ready. I kind of wrap it up and put it aside. So for these 3 ends, we'll just bring them up together so that they're even. You know, there's needle threaders out there. I don't think I have one with me today. There's the Clover needle threader. If you have any difficulty, one of your first steps is just wet that in your mouth. And then I just kind of twist that together. So it kind of now behaves as a single ply. We'll thread our needle. And I just tie a simple knot here around my index finger. I roll these, and then I just slide that knot down just like that. Okay? So let's go ahead and come up. We can certainly start with, this is very straightforward. You can imagine from here to here, you're just going to go here to here, straight stitch. Here, just straight stitch. Let's talk about this because it's curving and more difficult. I want to definitely address that. Make sure you're not tempted to do stitches too long, because we're going to basically go around this curved shape with straight stitches and give the illusion of curve. So with the back stitch, we come up and go down a short distance away. And we want to have that where the embroidery floss is flush with the fabric, but not so much that we're creating a tuck or a pucker. Now we go down just a little bit of a distance, and we come back to ourselves. That's why this is called a back stitch, is you keep coming back to yourself. And you just continue on. And the temptation will be to make your stitches a little bit longer. Try not to do that. The very best hand embroiderers I've ever seen have this very rhythmic, short little stitch, and it almost looks like type. You know, it's really beautiful. Now the quickest way to end that once you're all done, that's another reason to have the fusible interfacing on the back. There's just kind of more to grab into. I go back under the embroidery where I just was, and I just gently do a little tug. I don't want to crank on that or you'll create that pucker or tuck again. And I actually tie off twice. Probably not necessary, but it's just a habit. And then, you know, you don't want to necessarily trim exactly at that because it could just a little bit of a distance away. That's that part where it's just nice to have that extra layer on the back so you're not seeing those shadows of where the tails are. With French knots, you can, well, let me just show you how to do one, and then I'll show you how to vary the density of that. So we know that we want a French knot here and a French knot here. And you can absolutely be coming up, do your back stitch, and then just jump over and go ahead and do your French knot. Now we know that the word click is normally in red, but just because black is easier to see, we're going to just do this in black. We're coming up. I like to put the project down and hold the embroidery floss to my left if you're right-handed. Your needle will be running with the pointy part to the left and horizontal. Now I'm going to wrap around that needle one time. And I'm going to actually hold the project like this. One time. And I'm going to pivot back down right inside the hole where I just was. Now I'm holding tension on the left, and as I pull through, I continue to hold this until I can't hold it anymore and I let it go. That's a French knot. If you want more bulk, your options are, and she did this, she let us know that we'll be using 6 strands of red floss. So you'll automatically, by doing the same technique I just did, you have twice as many threads because you've got 6 instead of 3. Even with a single wrap, which is what I just did, you'll have a nice bulky French knot. Let's say that you've got 3 strands and you really want a bigger dot. It's okay. You can just, and this is kind of a bonus, go ahead and wrap 1 time, go ahead and wrap 2 times, and see now you have twice as many knots on there. And again, pivoting and going back down the same hole, holding the tension. And now I have a bigger knot. So that's another option. Tying off a French knot, because it's in such a small space, can be more difficult. That's why I would encourage you to go ahead and do your back stitch. And while you're there, go ahead and just do your French knot so you can go back up and tie off just like we did before, where you're kind of going back underneath yourself and tying off as you did. Okay, so you would continue with all of your hand embroidery, just like that, and then we just cut out on the line. The process is exactly the same for the larger piece of the smile block. Let me grab that fabric. She has one additional kind of mark on this, kind of a guide, I would say, and it's right here. So when you get ready to trace that design, notice this is a trimming guide, but there's these 2 little marks right here. You're going to want to mark those on your shape. Let me just bring that light box. I want to show you this and explain why that's there. It's an important little thing. All right, so you would just center that. And unlike this one that has the box around it, this block, You Make Me Smile, ends up getting squared up to 12.5 inches, which is wider than the paper, right? So that's why she couldn't give you the frame, because it's outside the boundary of the paper. So the guide here of the red line is important to mark, because well, later, once everything is hand embroidered and that line is drawn, let me just demonstrate that. We'll just draw that quick line. It's not a complete line this way, it's just a general guide. And here. Those 2 lines right there and right there. Go ahead and mark those. And then of course you'll do your embroidery. Once that is already done, the hand embroidery is complete. Going back into the instructions, I had to read this twice when I first saw that, and I'm like, what does she mean by that? Trimming up this block, measure 6 1/4 inches to the left of the center mark. Now this is a 6.5 inch ruler, and I love that they've got the 1/4 inch seam guide right there. What's nice about that is I know that that way is 6 1/4 inches, and 1/4 inch away, if I lay my 1/4 inch on that line, 6 1/4 inches is that direction. So this is a great ruler to be using throughout this particular project. It seems to be working in a lot of what I've been doing so far. So you would just go ahead, 6 1/4, 6 1/4, and then it's 2.5 inches, and we've already drawn that. And let me show you what that one looks like. Also adorable, of course. And those are our blocks. That's the very beginning. Now I noticed one thing that I want to point out to you is when I got all my things in my bags, there was one more bag, and it says love your selfie, row 1. And I'm like, but we didn't use that. And did I miss something? And I went back and read the instructions, and it's not used yet. So this is part of the mystery of what Kimberbell is just, building the anticipation and the excitement of what's to come. So don't worry if you get to the end of a row and you're expecting to use everything and there's something left over. I feel confident that as we move through the project, that this will be used at some time, but that's part of the mystery. So I'm getting ready for week 2. You have a lot to work on right now between applique and hand embroidery. So I'll see you next Monday for section 2 of the Love Notes Mystery Quilt.